Luis Rodriguez has traveled a long road, from the Chicano moratorium against the Vietnam War to Murderers Row in the Los Angeles City Jail to the Contra War in Nicaragua and Honduras and indigenous uprisings in Mexico. Last year, he actually ran for governor of California on the Green Party ticket. While he did not prevail, there is poetic justice. Luis Rodriguez is now the Poet Laureate of Los Angeles. Luis.
Piece by piece, they tear at you, peeling away layers of being, lying about who you are, speaking for your dreams. In the squalor of their eyes, you are an outlaw, dressing you in a jacket of lies, tailor-made in steel. You fit their perfect picture. Take it off. Make your own mantle. Question their interrogators. Eyeball the depth in their gaze. Say you won't succumb. Say you won't believe them when they rename you. Say you won't accept their codes, their colors, their putrid morals. Here you have a way. Here you can sing victory. Here you are not a conquered race, perpetual victim, the sullen face in a thunderstorm. Hands, minds that are carving out a sanctuary. Use these weapons against them. Use your given gifts. They are not stone. So, yes, thank you. That poem was written for all the forgotten, marginalized, pushed aside young people that I work with who get labeled, who get pushed aside, put in prison, killed by cops. And a good number of them are Chicanos, because I've known this firsthand. I want to just say, first of all, thank you for bringing Rosalio and Jorge and myself, and Tom Hayden in particular, but the organizers, for making sure that we're heard. Our story does not get heard, and yet we're so important to the story of progressive politics in this country. We're so important to what happens, but it gets forgotten, and I want to make sure that it does not ever get forgotten. It's important that we're included. People may not remember how we came to be. We came to be because we were invaded in 1848. We weren't Chicanos until then. We were Mexicans. We were Native peoples. We lived with Native peoples. In LA, LA was founded by Native peoples, Africans, and one Filipino. People of color. The first mayor of Los Angeles was a Native person from Sonora. What's really weird is now, after all these years, the strangers, the illegals, the foreigners are all these Native peoples who have been in this land as long as anybody coming up through the border, and now they don't belong. Now they're strangers. That's what's really weird and bad about what's happening. Chicanos, Latinos have been involved in civil rights struggles at the beginning. We're not new to this. Some of the first anti-segregationist battles were in Texas. As you know, the statistics came out about the lynchings. African Americans were lynched at extraordinary numbers, but the next group was Chicanos, Mexicanos from Texas. We've always been part of the struggle. One of the big important aspects of it was what happened during the Pachuco period in LA, when the Pachucos and the blacks combined, Zoot Suit and Pachuco culture came together, and they were attacked, as you know, in 1943. There was a so-called Zoot Suit riots, but people don't realize what happened afterwards. The cynicism of the society we were in brought in heroin into these neighborhoods, arrested these kids consistently at extraordinary numbers. I know, because we're several generations of heroin addicts in the streets of East LA, and it came out of that whole movement. I don't know if you know, but after World War II, all the poppy fields that we used to get morphine for the soldiers in Vietnam, during the World War II, were abandoned, and they helped create the first drug lords. U.S. policy, U.S. arrogance, government arrogance, and by the time I got involved with gangs, as some of you know, we already had several generations of Pachuco Cholos who had already influenced so much, but they were constantly being put into prisons. They became the largest single group in the California prison, which, as you know, is the largest prison system in the world other than the federal prison. 60% of the California prisoners come from LA County. The largest single group is Chicano, even though African Americans are much more disproportionately in there. Black and brown have been misused, abused, and killed off in Los Angeles. During the so-called gang wars, the worst gang period of wars, 1980 to year 2000, an estimated 15,000 young people were killed, almost all black and brown. They started what was called gang injunctions, where they arrest whole neighborhoods. They got 40 of them in LA covering 70 neighborhoods. You cannot congregate more than 2 or 3 people at a time. If you got tattoos, you can be stopped. You get put on a database. You have a curfew, can't carry back, can't have cell phones. All these things that you don't even see in the third world is happening in the US, in Los Angeles, all black and brown communities. So everything from Ferguson to Eric Garner to Baltimore speaks to me directly. When I was in the gang, 4 of my friends, unarmed, were killed by police. And people may not be aware, but in LA, in the last 10 years, 600 people were killed by police officers. More than 50% of them were unarmed. More than 50% were Latino. And again, the rest were African American, disproportionate to the numbers. I wanted to bring you these numbers so you know how important all of this is and the struggle that we're in, not just domestically, but also that we were sent out to war and fought, and how some of us came back and fought against war. And we've always been doing this. The Chicano moratorium in particular has a very special place for me. When the mayor made me poet laureate, I had to tell a story that he did it in the Central Library downtown LA. Beautiful, all the shelves, but I had to tell them the story that they didn't know. I was homeless, 15 years old, in those streets, and that was my shelter. And I was walking those shelves, and now here I am, poet laureate, among all those shelves. And I told them how important it was that you recognize how somebody can come up like that. I was not into politics when I first got involved in the battle against the Vietnam War. I was a gangster. I was on heroin. I was mugging people. I didn't care about politics. Somebody told me there was a big giant march against the Vietnam War. I didn't know anything about it. I thought it was a big party. I went to party. I brought some of my homies. But something happened that day. 30,000 people showed up with signs. Raza sí, guerra no. Our people, yes. War, no. People were marching. People were singing. There was drumming. They were saying, we're not going to send any more of our kids. Because as you know, black and brown were disproportionately killed off in that war. And something woke up in me. I didn't understand this. So when the sheriffs and other police people attacked the 30,000 that had gathered in the park, there was children, there was people with blankets, coolers, there was people out of their steps. It was Laguna Park right there in East LA. They were coming out of their home, they would put chairs and they were sitting there. The police attacked it. I was right there at the heart of it. I was at the epicenter when I saw this happening. And I remember when they would go into the tear gas, going into people all over, but they also went to people's houses and pulled them out of their houses and beating them up. They were beating up everybody they could. And they beat me up because you know why? Some guy told me, don't fight back. Tomorrow's another day. And I told him, no more mañanas for me. I stood my ground and I said, I ain't moving. And when the cops come up to me, I started raging against them. And of course, I got beaten down really badly, bleeding, everything. They put me in a car unit. But here's one thing that people didn't know that happened. They arrested hundreds of people. As you know, 3 people were killed that day. Another person was killed on another day. There was a so-called riot in which buildings were burned, millions of dollars of damage. But I was there. What they didn't realize is they got about 5 or 6 of us gangsters, so-called cholos. People were let go after a few hours. They didn't leave us go. They had us in juvenile hall, and then they put us in the Hall of Justice jail, as was mentioned. The Hall of Justice jail has a murderer's row. It's famous because Sir Hans was been there, Charles Manson was there, Carl Chessman was there. I was there next to a cell of Charles Manson. 16 years old, protecting a 13-year-old. You weren't supposed to be there till you were 18. Why were we there? They were going to charge us for the murders of the people that got killed in that so-called East LA riot. And you know why nobody cared? Because we were cholos, we were gangsters. The police were looking for scapegoats. And a good thing that happened that Rosalia told me is that people took a lot of pictures. We actually preceded the video era now where everybody's taking pictures. And they actually showed cops killing people. And there was a lot of footage, so they couldn't really blame it on us. So we were there for several days. We were lost. My family couldn't find me. Nobody could figure out what to do. And then one day they woke me up in the middle of the night and took me out and let me go. I said, what the heck happened? They were going to set us up and they couldn't do it because that movement and those people stood up and kept insisting this was an injustice and the sheriff's deputies attacked us. And I've been a revolutionary ever since because now it is about politics and now it is about change and it is about a new world, and that's something I've been fighting ever since. And it was that moment that woke me up. One thing you should know, they were protecting Charles Manson because everybody wanted to kill him. There's a black and brown murderers row except for him. They were protecting him, but nobody cared about me. The first time I was there, they put a razor blade to my neck. Somebody could have killed me. Now, I stood up to these people. I stood up to everybody. They didn't do anything to me, but nobody would care. And that's when I realized, if I woke up the next morning with my throat cut, who would care about Luis Rodriguez? Charles Manson was more valuable than Luis Rodriguez. So you learn politics the hard way. I learned it. Then I studied, and I also carried it out, and now I work with young people. Me and my wife started a cultural center. We serve 15,000 people. Not only do we have music, arts, dance, theater, we teach them their indigenous roots. We connect with the Native American community. We also have community events, community dialogues. We're taking on the bullet train in California because it's going through all the poor neighborhoods. So we're going there, they're going to displace us. We're going to take it on. We are battling even today, and we're still battling. So, I just want to end with one more poem that I actually wrote in jail at 16 years old. By the way, you know, I got arrested for attempted murder a year later, and then when I was 18, I was facing my first prison term, and they actually offered me Vietnam, to go to Vietnam, if I, you know, which by then I was already politicized. I said I ain't going. Unfortunately for me, I didn't do that state prison term because the community by then stepped up, wrote letters on my behalf, and they stopped me from doing that, and I've always been beholden to my community since then. So this poem I want to read is a poem about how I was called to revolution, how I was called to be a writer and a poet, and how I was called to be somebody who I am today. It wasn't by accident, and somehow I met that call, and the poem is called The Calling. And I first started writing it when I was there in jail. It was badly written. Years later, I fixed it up. But I want to share it with you and to end at least my part so that we know that poetry matters in the revolution and in our struggle, and we got to make sure all the arts are properly at the heart of everything we do. And remember that the poets sometimes are the ones that keep telling the truth even when everybody else stops telling the truth. We got to keep telling it. So I want to end with this poem. It's called The Calling, and I hope you get how powerful it is, that experience, and being here with you. Because as far as I'm concerned, I've been with you ever since. And even if I wasn't totally recognized, I've been in that struggle, and we've been together, and we got to now recognize how we are one community, black, brown, white, and yellow, and everybody coming together. Poem goes like this. The calling came to me while I languished in my room, while I withered away my youth in jail cells and damp Vadio fields. It brought me to life out of captivity in a street-scarred and tattooed place I call body. Until then, I waited silently, a deafening clamor in my head, voiceless to all around, hidden from America's eyes, a brown boy without a name. I would sing into a solitary tape recorder, music never to be heard. I would write my thoughts in scrambled English. I would take photos in my mind, plan out new parks, bushy green, concrete free, new places to play and think. Waiting. Then it came, the calling. It brought me out of my room. It forced me to escape night captors and street prisons. It called me to war, to be writer, and march, to be scientists and march with the soldiers of change. It called me from the shadows, out of the wreckage of my barrio, from among those who did not exist. I waited all of 16 years for this time. Somehow unexpected, I was called. Thank you all very much. Thank you.